Well, good morning, church. How you doing? It is so good to see you this morning. I do want to say before we get started that if you were a part of Fall Festival yesterday, wow, yeah. Hey, we were expecting 200 or 300 people to come through the doors, and we lost count, somewhere over 500. Over 50 volunteers. It was an incredible day. I think our community was blessed, our families were blessed, and Doug got dunked a lot. So it was incredible. Yeah, a couple special thank yous. First, to our family life team who pulled it off. They worked so hard. I just could not be more proud to get to serve with our family life team. And then specifically, Eddie Fontaine and Greg Campbell pulled so much weight this last week for us. So thank you. We have a lot of people asking who won Trunk or Treat. Drum roll, please. We have not announced yet. She's either in this service or the next. Tracy Maxon won Trunk or Treat. Yeah. So very excited. Fall Festival is incredible. Can't wait for next year. And if you weren't a part this year, please make plans next year. It's going to be around Halloween again. It's the best party in town, and I want you to be a part of it, all right? This last week, I got to be interviewed for our preschool Instagram as the new pastor on staff. It's kind of like the Huffington Post for the 805, so kind of a big deal. So they asked me a question, though, that stumped me at the time, but I've come up with a better answer since. At the time, they said, what is something that we should know about you that we don't? And I thought, man, I don't have a good answer right now. I wish I did. Since, having thought about it, I've come up with two good answers, maybe. Here's the first one. I collect hotel pins. Because it's a collection that if I lose, I don't care. And not just like nice, like really boutique hotels or exotic locations, like literally the Days Inn in Carpinteria or something. So I use these pins all the time. My backpack is filled of really nice and really cheap hotel pins from all over. If you travel, if you ever think of me, bring me your hotel pin. I had a friend who gave me the hotel pin that he had when they went to the Ojai Valley Inn. I've never been because I'm a baller on a budget. But he went, and the pen's like a boat anchor. It's incredible. You're like, wow, maybe all that money was just for the pen. And before you start thinking it's weird, we all know somebody who collects thimbles or small spoons. Those people are weird. I'm not weird, okay? We get tons of hate mail this week from people like, my mother collected thimbles. So no, hotel pins. The other is I really enjoy reading about weird, eccentric artists. I don't know much about art, but I enjoy reading the biographies about eccentric artists and art through the decades and in history. And a couple years ago, I came across this guy named Yves Klein. If you were in Paris in the 50s or 60s, you would know the name Yves Klein, although now he's relatively unknown. But he did this exhibition for a while in Paris where he sold airspace above Paris, immaterial zones that he did not own above Paris. He was becoming increasingly concerned with the commodification of art, the idea that art was no longer about what it said or its skill of the artist or how beautiful it was. It was really just about the name that was on the design, the name that was on the canvas. And so he was trying to respond to, is it still really about good art or is it now really about what art is worth? So he decided to create 8 zones around Paris in just the air. And he had this kind of this gambit where for $500 in gold, he would sell you one of the zones above Paris and give you a receipt with his name on it. Presumably, the receipt would be worth a lot of money because he was only going to sell 8 of these. For half the money, for half the gold, he would sell you the same zone, but he had to watch you burn the receipt over the Seine River. So you would end up with nothing tangible, nothing physical in response to the art, right? He sold all 8 zones, and only 3 people chose to burn the receipt. The other 5 kept the receipt, and the other 5 are still in existence, and as he assumed, are worth a great deal of money. Now, this morning, I would like to propose that I'm beginning an art exhibit in Montalvo, selling airspace above my home. I've got 2 kids to put through college. Receipt is included, reasonable price. Come find me after the service. I would love to sell you a zone of Ventura. But maybe Klein wasn't crazy. Maybe Klein understood human nature, that what we crave and what we desire and what we want is something tangible. Sure, the Hebrew people had experienced the power of God, had experienced how amazing and how gracious God would be in the plagues and bringing them out of Egypt and feeding them with manna and quail and providing for them, splitting a Red Sea. But in Exodus chapter 32, Moses is long in being away. And they say, we need something physical. We need something tangible. We want to hold. We want to be able to touch. We want to be able to carry like a lucky rabbit's foot. We need a God like they had in Egypt. And so they make a golden calf. And they again fracture the relationship between God's people and God. Maybe Klein understood and got at something about human nature that is true of all of us as well. We want something physical. We want that reassurance. We want that insurance. It's the reason that I still want a physical accounting of my retirement account every quarter. It's the reason that when we go to the airport, my wife is fine with the ticket on her phone, but I really want a physical ticket. I feel more comfortable with a physical ticket. Someone said amen. Yeah. Like, I know it's on my phone, but like a million things can happen, right? And like, I think Russia's hacking it or something. I don't know. I just want a physical ticket. It's the reason I need the insurance. I need the assurance. And the nation of Israel was like, just make for us a God like we've seen before and we know. God tells Moses, go back down there. They've missed it again. They're afraid of the future. They've been waiting too long. If you've been with us in this series, the shallow end, you know that we're looking at Exodus 34, verses 6 and 7, as God describes himself, gives us his name and his character, but we would be remiss to forget that the frame or context with which we're given the name of God and the character of God is right after this great failing. It's right after they make a calf, and it's right after this repentance that Moses comes back to mediate and says, we just messed up. God, are you still with us? God, we just sinned. We just failed you again. Are you still here, or did you break up with us? And in 33:16, Moses is going to say, God, what will distinguish us among all the peoples on earth? And God responds, I will be the God that you experience, not control. I will be the God you experience, not the God you can control. And so Moses, God, are you sure? If you're not with us, don't send us. God, if that was the last straw, if the golden calf was it, then just let us know. And he's going to respond. If you have your Bibles, turn. Exodus chapter 34. We'll start reading in verse 4. 34:4. Doug always says if you have a device, you can turn it on. But remember, I like paper tickets. So get your 34:4. So Moses chiseled out 2 stone tablets like the first ones and went up Mount Sinai early in the morning as the Lord had commanded him. And he carried the 2 stone tablets in his hand. 5. Then the Lord came down in the cloud and stood there with him and proclaimed his name, Yahweh, the Lord. The first stone tablets God would carve. The second Moses had to carve. This is almost identical to Exodus chapter 19, the first time Moses goes up there to receive the law, to receive the covenant. They're reenacting it, so this will be a renewal of the covenant after they sinned with the golden calf. And like a tender father showing his daughter or son how to use a tool, before God gives Moses the commandments and law again, he's going to say, but Moses, before we get down to business, before I give you the commands, let me remind you who I am. Let me tell you why we do this. I remember there were a number of tools in the garage when I was growing up, and my father would pull it out. He'd show it to me, say, son, this is what it's for. This is how we use this tool, and this is why we keep it this way, and this is how you use it. And he was training me up, if you will. God brings Moses close, and Moses is probably just so embarrassed and sheepish. He's got the stone tablets he carved, very amateurish, because God carved the first, and he's like, all right, let's just do this again real quick. And God says, hold on. I need you to know who I am. I need you to know why we're doing this, Moses. I want to remind you. Verse 6. And he, God, passed in front of Moses, proclaiming, Yahweh, Yahweh, the Lord, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands and forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin. Yet he does not leave the guilty unpunished. He punishes the children and their children for the sin of the fathers to the third and fourth generation. Moses just wants reassurance. Are you with us, God? Are you still there? He wants reassurance. God offers his resume. Moses, don't you know who I am? I am the God that is long-suffering. I'm the God that is gracious and compassionate. Moses, you ask if I'm still there, and I respond, do you know my name? But of course I'm still there. But of course. Megan and I have been married 13 years, and there have been some tough years in there between losses of job or loved ones, losses of dreams, several different things. But we have this phrase that if you've been married for any amount of time, you understand that you and your partner develop a shorthand. And we have this phrase that will say, nothing is broken that can't be put back together. Nothing is broken that can't be fixed. It's the way we remind each other that things may be difficult right now, but we can put this back together. We can figure this out. There is a way ahead. God, in response to Moses' inquisition, are you there? Did we break up? God says, oh, Moses, nothing is broken that can't be put back together. I am gracious and compassionate, long-suffering, abounding in love and faithfulness. Go back to verse 6. I want to look at 5 words, 2 ideas. 5 words, 2 ideas. Yahweh, Yahweh, the Lord, compassionate and gracious, slow to anger. Here it is. Abounding in love and faithfulness. Abounding in love and faithfulness. Abounding, describing the presence of quantity. Abounding, describing the abundance and presence of quantity. Like Tigger on his tail, ready to spring. I am always ready to act from abounding love and faithfulness. I'm always willing to relate to you and to come to you in love and in faithfulness. There's always stacks and stacks and racks of love and faithfulness for my people. There's always more. The storehouse is never empty. My 2.5-year-old Pax loves the red sugar-free applesauce from Target. They come in red pouches. He calls them red bites. And we have a cabinet where we keep the red bites. He's only allowed 2 a day because I'm not Jeff Bezos. And so he'll come if he's not maxed out as 2, and he'll point at the cabinet and he'll go, red bitey. And I'll get him a red bitey and be like, there you go, right? But occasionally it's time for dad or mom to go back to Target to get more red bites, and we're out. And he'll walk up and he'll point at the cabinet, red bitey. Like, sorry, bud, we don't have any. And he looks at me incredulous, like, what do you mean you don't have any? Open the door. That's the cabinet. There's always red bites in the cabinet, Dad. Dad, just go get mom. Go get mom. This is ridiculous. It's the red bitey cabinet. Did you forget? With God, the cabinet's never empty. With God, the cabinet's never dry. Quantities, an explosion, an abundance of love and of faithfulness. This is how God operates. This is how God connects with his people. This is how God operates with his people. Abounding again and again, an explosion of love and faithfulness. Love and faithfulness. 2 words that actually in the Hebrew describe one quality of God. 2 words that in the Hebrew describe one quality of God. The Hebrew word is chesed. Chesed. Studied Hebrew for 4 years to give you that H. Chesed. Hesed describes a legal contract from a sovereign or king to his or her people. A hesed relationship is a one-sided relationship that describes a contract between a king or a sovereign to his or her people. The Hebrew words literally translate extreme hospitality. Extreme hospitality. He says, our relationship has always been this one-sided contract. Psalm 136:1, give thanks to the Lord, for his hesed endures forever. Psalm 25:10, all of God's paths are hesed and true. The Talmud, some of the oldest writing we have on the Jewish text, writes, hesed is one-sided giving, a type of charity and kindness without the possibility of reciprocity. It's a one-sided contract. You have no trump or spade up your sleeve. You're not negotiating. You have nothing to leverage. It is all a one-sided contract. The Assyrians and the Babylonians created contracts like this after they conquered villages or cities. When they were trying to win the hearts of the people, they would create a Hesed covenant or a Hesed contract and say, there's nothing you can do. You have nothing to offer us, but this is what we will do for you. God takes a contract form that already existed, that Moses and the people would have already known, and says, this is what I'm like. I'm a God to whom you cannot repay. I'm a God to whom you never run short of love and faithfulness from me, and I expect you to give me nothing in return. One of the only times we see this contract or covenant form used outside of Scripture is when a nobleman gave land to a foot soldier who saved his son in battle. The idea of someone of great resource and wealth giving to someone who has no means or ability to repay it. A one-sided relationship without the possibility of repaying it. Moses says, are you still there? We've messed up again, God. God's response is, oh, don't you understand? This relationship is never predicated on your faithfulness. This relationship never assumed you would be able to give anything back to me. That would be karma, and this is grace. It's a one-sided relationship. To understand this covenant fully, you have to go back to Genesis chapter 15 when God made the covenant initially with Abraham. And in this weird scene, he uses this covenant contract. And it's kind of like the zip tie holding up the heat shield underneath my beat up old car. It's not what it's intended for, but it works. In the same way, the Assyrians use this contract, the Babylonians use this contract. God's using something because it'll work. And he says, Abraham, take some doves and some heifers and some animals and cut them in half and spread them across. And when two people would enter a contract, they would hold hands and walk in between the carcasses of these animals in full view of the city or of witnesses. And they would declare their obligations to one another. This is what I will do, and this is what I will do. This is what I will sell you, and this is what I will pay for you. And the connotation was, if I don't hold up my end of the bargain or obligation, may it become to me or come for me like these animals. May it end up for me like these animals. But in Genesis chapter 15, God has Abraham cut the animals, spread them out, and then Abraham falls into a deep sleep, and God alone walks through those animals. Abraham, you won't be able to keep this covenant. I'll keep it myself. Abraham, I just can't even imagine that you would be faithful to what we're committing to. I will be the one to pull it off for us. I will be the one to obligate myself. You have no ability to offer anything to me. I will be faithful to you. My soteriology professor in graduate school used to say, to the degree you contributed to your salvation, you can lose it. But if you contributed nothing, then you're in no danger. If God was the one who accomplished not only our salvation, but sustaining and maintaining our relationship, the covenant, then we're in no danger. There was never an expectation we'd be able to keep it. God, are you still there? Oh, Moses, if you knew me, you wouldn't even have to ask. Moses, if you knew me, you wouldn't even question. Of course I'm still here. Of course I'm on your side. If you have a hotel pen, I want to give you 3 things that I think change. If this is true, if this proposition is accurate, if this idea is right, 3 things that I think change everything. Here's the first one. What God has done in the past is a pattern and a promise of what he will do in the future, but he's too creative to do the same thing twice the same way. What God has done in the past is a pattern and a promise of what he will do in the future, but he's too creative to do the same thing twice the same way. Moses, this won't be the first time you sin. Moses, won't be the first time you mess up. I realize that you will be unfaithful, and yet I'm not going anywhere. You are my chosen people. I originated this covenant, this contract, and I will be the one to sustain it and fulfill it. When Megan and I were first married, we were so broke, we had a tumbleweed as a pet. The coyote wouldn't stop at the door at night. I mean, they just knew there was nothing in the house. We made $19,400 that first year of marriage. And that wasn't the Great Depression, young people. That was the early 2000s. We didn't have money. We had one car. And Megan would need that car to go to work every day. And I would walk or get a ride from a friend to go to school. This sounds like my dad's story of like, walk to school in the snow uphill both ways. Like, no, you didn't, Dad. No, you didn't. One day the transmission went out on the Ford Explorer. And the mechanic wanted $2,800 to fix it. We didn't have it. We didn't have $2,800. And so the car sat there at the mechanics, and we were just praying about it, didn't know what to do. I went to seminary or school that day, and often as our classes did, they began with the professor saying, are there any prayer requests we can pray for as we get started? And I just raised my hand and said, I've got a need that I don't know what to do with and how the Lord's going to answer, but would you just pray that God would provide? 3 days later, I went to my mailbox on campus, and there was an anonymous Hallmark card with $3,000 cash in it. Yeah. I called Megan just crying, just said, honey, he did it. God provided. I don't know how. Fixed the transmission, had that car for a number of years. About 6 years later, we end up in Seattle, and I'm at a small church that doesn't pay us much, can't pay us much, and she's in law school full time. We again have one car, but she needs to take it into Seattle every day, and so we need a car, but we can't afford a car payment and don't have much money in the bank. So we just start praying, God, what are you going to do? How are you going to provide? Bring this need to you. And a really sweet old man in the church named John Castle came up one day after service and said, I just feel like God's leading me to sell you my truck for $100. I just want to sell you my truck for $1. Now, it wasn't a Tesla, people. It was older than the Ford Explorer we got rid of years before. It looked like it was a Parker Murphy car. What God has done in the past is a promise and a pattern of what God will do in the future. He's just too creative to do it the same way twice. He's just too creative to do it the same way twice. This is how we rehearse belief. We take moments and go, God, I just thought that was going to sink our battleship, and you provided, so why would I doubt you wouldn't this time? God, I was sure that was the moment where this whole thing came to a nasty end, and you delivered. God, that moment, it was the bleakest and darkest of our life, and yet now, years later, I look back, and you delivered, you provided. God, you showed up. Why would you not now? What he's done in the past is a promise of what he will do in the future. It's a pattern, but he's just too creative to do the same thing twice the same way. I want to pause for a moment, and this isn't in the notes, people, but someone in here, a couple of y'all may be those John Castles who've got something that you know you need to give away, that someone one day will be standing on a stage and saying, their generosity got me down the road in God's journey, in God's story, and no one ever regretted being generous. Do it. Do it. There's a warning with this one. Beware of ever trusting in the ways God has provided before. Be careful in trusting and looking towards the ways God has provided before. He may have provided through your savings account before. He may have provided through your 401k. He may have provided through a neighbor. He may have provided through a partner or a spouse or a family member or whatever it is. Don't assume that's how he will provide this time, because God will not be rivaled as your provider. He is the source. He just uses different conduits. He uses different means. He uses different channels. What God has done in the past is a pattern, is a promise of what he will do again, like those peas. It's just too creative to do the same way twice. Second, your past will never dictate his presence. Your past will never dictate his presence. Pastor, writer, and recovering alcoholic Brennan Manning writes, so here we are, the church, the multitude who so wanted to be faithful, who at times got defeated, soiled by life, and bested by trials, wearing the bloody garments of life's tribulations, but through it all clung to faith. If this is not good news to you, you have never understood the gospel of grace. Nothing is broken that can't be put back together. You may be here this morning thinking, what happened last night or last week surely means I shouldn't be here. Surely means God is done with me. Surely means that he could no longer bless, no longer take care of, no longer has a plan for me. And I'm telling you, your past does not dictate his presence. No, if you've got life and breath today, he's got a plan. And you have not outsinned his grace. You have not outlived your utility. Your past, your mistakes, it never dictates his presence. And so maybe you need to hear that this morning. He is not done. He is not done with you. Third and finally, often we must wait for something beautiful to happen. Often we must wait for something beautiful to happen. Or as the writer Corey Asbury says, if the story isn't good, the story's not over. If the story's not good, the story's not over yet. Sometimes we have to wait for something beautiful. It was Israel's inability to wait that ultimately led them into this sin, was it not? Moses has been gone a long time. Just give us a bull, give us a calf like we knew in Egypt. We'll be comfortable again. We'll feel safe again. We'll feel reassured again. Just wait a little bit longer. He's doing something beautiful. Often the promises of God take longer than we want. Abraham was promised more descendants than the stars in the sky. He died with 8 sons. That's a family band. David didn't get to build a temple. Solomon couldn't keep a kingdom. The promises of God, they are never late, but they're often taking longer than we wish they would. We often have to wait for something beautiful to happen. And as one of my favorite artists says, there is no art if you're unwilling to wait for the paint to dry. There is no art if you're unwilling to wait for the paint to dry. We've got to wait for something beautiful to happen. If you were to go to Barcelona today, a must-see tourist attraction is the Basilica Familia Sagrada. It's this beautiful cathedral that was begun in 1882 by a man by the name of Antonio Gaudi. If you remember your aunt's decorating style, so gaudy, came from his name. And now all the ants are angry with me. In 1882, he designed the basilica and would spend 43 years of his life working on it. And 139 years later, it's still not done. Slated to be completed in 2026. It's just gorgeous if you ever have the chance. But in an interview at the end of his life, Gaudi was asked about the timeline, why it was taking so long to complete. And his response was, "My client isn't in a hurry." My client isn't in a hurry. What God has done in the past is a promise. It's a pattern of what he will do again, though he's too creative to do the same thing twice the same way. So we have to wait, because often the work of God that will end up beautiful just takes a little bit of time. You may be on the 5-yard line this morning thinking, I need to throw in the towel. Wait a little bit longer. Wait a little bit longer. He's doing something beautiful. Can I pray for you? For those in this room, Lord, that came in and they've got a need in the family, in their own life, whether it be financial, relational, and they just thought, God, I don't even know why I'm here this morning. I'm not feeling it. I'm not going to get anything out of it. Would you remind them right now that the God they have experienced is the God that will deliver again. The God they have seen provide is the God whose storehouse is still not empty. Remind them that you are the same God. And help us, God, to rehearse belief that you have provided there and here and again. And so, God, why would you not now? You've never left us abandoned on the side of the road yet, God. And so we trust that in your timing, you will deliver again. For those that are here this morning, God, or online that said, God's done with me. I've sinned so much. I've made so many mistakes. I've just messed it up again and again and again. I've been unwilling to wait on the spouse, unwilling to wait on him to do this, unwilling for him to provide in this way. God, remind them this morning you are not done with them. If their heart is beating and their lungs are taking in air, you've got a second act for them, God. Another chapter. God's not done yet. And for those of us in this room, God, that are clinging to faith about a specific way we want you to provide, need you to deliver, need you to pony up on that miracle. God, we declare now we're willing to wait a little bit longer because you were faithful. We're willing to wait a little bit longer because you were faithful. And the paint's going to dry if this is going to be art. And we'll look back one day and see how beautiful it is. Oh, the story isn't over if the story isn't good. God, thank you that you are so good. We declare these things in the name of your Son, Jesus. Amen. Would you stand up and sing with us?